The Plastic Overshoot Day is essentially the day during the year when the generation of plastic waste exceeds the capacity that we have in treating this waste. So it means that leads then to environmental pollution. And that date this year is September 5th, 2024.
Welcome to Plastisphere, the podcast on plastics, people, and the planet. My name is Anja Krieger. We've just passed the Global Plastic Overshoot Day, September 5th. That means that the world has been able to handle its waste until now, but the waste we produce the rest of the year statistically ends up as pollution. Imagine the huge pile of plastic packaging and other stuff that the world disposes of in just 4 months. That will end up in the environment, according to this calculation. But in comparison, September 5th might also be good news, because last year's Plastic Overshoot Day was much earlier, at the end of July. So at first, I was like, wow, we won a full month, so waste management must have really improved in the past year. I asked Sarah Perreard of Earth Action, the NGO that calculates the Plastic Overshoot Day.
Well, if only that was the case, I'd be really happy about it. But unfortunately, this is not as simple. So last year, we had focused on packaging and short-life plastics. So like, for example, the single-use plastics, everything that is used for less than a year. This year, we have also included within the scope of this study the textile sector, because we know that this is also a really large source of pollution. The fast fashion and ultra fast fashion is growing really rapidly. We know that those products are often made of a lot of plastic, and that they are used for a short period of time. And so as a result, they end up in landfills, they end up in nature, etc. So it was really key for us to also show that aspect into this year's study. So we have enlarged essentially the scope. We now cover more or less half of the plastic that is used by humanity. We still exclude industrial waste and automobile and other long life plastics items from the study. But with that change, it changes a lot the different dates, because textile in some parts of the world is typically used for a longer period of time. It's reused afterwards, etc. And in some countries, the waste mismanagement is lower for textile than for packaging. You will see that not everywhere, but that is essentially one big change that came as a result of the scope between last year and this year.
Mm-hmm. And because of your new approach, you also recalculated previous years. What was the trend you were able to observe in terms of how global waste management is developing?
So what we see is that we do have an increase in waste management capacity year over year. We also see that if we look only at the date, we are moving forward a few days every year. So we were at the 28th of August in 2021, then the 30th of August, then September 4th, and this year, September 5th. So it looks like it's improving, but we also see a pretty steep increase in the capacity of plastic production and essentially of plastic waste being put on the market. So if you balance all of that, more plastic is put on the market, more capacity is also brought to treat this waste, but this capacity hardly covers the additional plastic put on the market. So what we see when we look at the waste that is mismanaged in terms of tons of plastic ending up in nature, it's still as big. We are doing better in terms of proportion of waste that is treated, but in terms of volume, because we put so much more plastic than we add capacity, it doesn't actually improve the state of plastic pollution.
Right. On your website, I read this huge number that you calculated, that 70 million tons of waste have escaped waste management systems in the past year. So that would end up in the soil and rivers, the ocean, or the air. That seems like a pretty huge number to me compared to other calculations. Tell me more about how you arrived there and what that includes.
Yes, sure. So this is the waste that we consider mismanaged. Those 70 million tons of waste is what ends up into environment in general. This is what the system, the waste management system, still needs to fix so that eventually there's really no more pollution. This is really for packaging, for textile, for household, single-use plastic, etc. We might still see some leakage of plastic coming from industrial applications, from automotive, from long life plastics. It's just way harder to find data at the moment to really know what's the end of life of those plastics. So that's why it's not included into those calculations yet. We hope that just like we were able to add textile this year, we will be able to increase the scope and have this really precise picture. So in reality, this 70 million tons is probably larger, but we don't know with precision how to assess that yet. And so that's why we have this reduced scope of packaging and textile, essentially.
Right. And I think your calculations illustrate just once again how important it is that we get a strong plastics treaty. One of the things that's discussed in the negotiations is extended producer responsibility. So basically getting plastic producers and other companies involved in solving the issue. Do you have recommendations for what countries should do to solve plastic pollution?
So first, the global rules are really key because this is how we are able to build a strong treaty and to have this accountability also on the results. Extended producer responsibility enables to funnel funding towards the waste management system, but not only. Extended producer responsibility could also be used to work on waste prevention. And that's one of the things that I believe is not yet discussed enough in the sphere of extended producer responsibility, waste prevention, and not just waste treatment as part of EPR investments. And then we know also when we analyze and we do a lot of scenario modeling into our day-to-day work that without plastic production reduction, we will not be able to curb plastic pollution. And so I know that this is a very difficult subject in the negotiations. So my hopes are not so high at that stage, but this is something that must be tackled too. Otherwise, we will continue run into the same issues as we have today with the production that is increasing so fast that we are not able to keep up with the treatment capacity that is brought.
You have a really great website, plasticovershoot.earth, where people can read up on your report and also read your recommendations, which include capping and reducing global plastic production, phasing out plastics not designed for circular use, and much more. So as a last question, Sarah, what are you up to next with Earth Action?
So we are working on quite a lot of different subjects. We know that there's an estimation of $5.2 trillion that needs to be invested into waste management and waste prevention by 2040 if we want to curb plastic pollution by more than 95%. Some of that might come from governments, but there's also critically a need for the funding that goes more broadly than governments. And so companies, corporations also will have to be part of that effort. And currently what we see is that there's no incentives for companies to really be part of that discussion when it comes to investing into infrastructure. That's something that no one company can do alone. And so one of the things that we are developing within the Plastic Footprint Network is a framework for target setting and mitigation of corporate pollution. And it means having an alignment so that companies can all build their strategy in alignment with the treaty coming targets or with zero pollution at 2040. But we also want those companies to invest into infrastructure together with other companies so that waste can be reduced, so that waste can be treated. And eventually we also want them to invest into remediation. And to date, there is no such framework that allows to have really a comprehensive, comparable accounting of footprint and mitigation. And that's what has come since the Paris Agreement for climate. There's been the Science-Based Target Initiative and then the Net Zero Initiative. This is what all companies are using to develop their climate strategy. We don't have that yet for plastic. And this is essentially what we are developing and that we plan on publishing ahead of INC 5. And that's really a huge effort that needs to happen in collaboration between governments that then should feel empowered to raise the bar, to ask for this framework to be used at national level. And that links really closely with how companies can then align with the treaty targets, because a lot of work is going to have to happen in the coming years after we hopefully have a robust treaty in December this year.
Thanks so much, Sarah, for sharing all this with us.
Thank you so much, Anya. Pleasure being with you today.
This was our Plastisphere update on Plastic Overshoot Day. If you haven't listened to our previous episode with Sarah and her colleague Julien, I highly recommend to do so. In that episode, Sarah also shared her personal journey with me, from working for a big plastic producing company to starting Earth Action with Julien. I'll paste the links for you in the show notes. The music was from Blue Dot Sessions, Plastisphere theme is by Doreen Roy, the cover art by Maren von Stockhausen, and all production by me. The final round of negotiations for the Global Plastics Treaty is just around the corner, so this podcast might pop up in your feed more often in the next few weeks. If you haven't subscribed to Plastisphere, do so. And if you liked this episode, rate, review, and share it. I'll be back soon. Stay tuned.